Want to get started and welcome everyone to our community convening where we're going to be reimagining trails through arts and culture. My name is Jocelyn Scudder. I am the Executive Director of the Arts Council for Park City and Summit County, and we're so happy to have you today. I do, even though we've all used Zoom for many moons now, it seems, I do feel like we should do some housekeeping just for good measure. Even we were dealing with some technical issues this morning. So, you know, no matter how much expertise we can have, there's always some bumps in the road. So I do want to let you know that since this is a webinar, you do not, the attendees, you won't have any mic or camera access. But you will have chat access. And so I want to make sure that as Jim, who's our guest speaker today, is presenting, I want to encourage all of you to, you know, as a question comes up, feel free to put it in the chat. Jake and I will be monitoring the chat, and we'll make sure that we'll do our best, at least depending on time, to get to all the questions that are in the chat for the day. So please be sure to feel inspired, keep ideas flowing, and ask questions. I do want to let you know that this meeting is being recorded. So we will archive it. We always put it on our website after the meeting. So if you want to share with any of your networks, you're welcome to. We will have it, or if you need to leave early and you want to listen to the end of the conversation, that's fine too. There is closed captioning available. There is a live transcript for anyone who needs it. And please let us know if there's any other accessibility needs on your end. Feel free to put it in the chat or private chat to either of us. And then I did want to go over some goals and intentions today. You know, as an arts council, these creative conversations are super important. They give me energy personally, and so we love hosting these. But really, our goal is when we host these community convenings, one is to inspire community and fuel creative conversation. It's something that I enjoy, and I think hopefully, since many of you are here, you enjoy as well. We also want to showcase how arts and culture can help further a variety of community priorities and align with collective priorities and strategic recommendations that are in the Project ABC Cultural Plan, which was launched in 2018, and I'll get to that in a bit. We always want to shine a light on current and relevant topics that are at the forefront of conversation today. And whether it's the rail trail corridor, which we are going to be talking about today, or maybe it's rural arts development, sustainable tourism, diversity, equity, inclusion, and access, and so on. And some of you may remember we've done community convenings on all of those topics. But the relevance to our community is really important when we're curating this series. And then, of course, we want to celebrate and learn from people who are doing inspiring and innovative work in the arts and culture sector and in other communities. So we're so thrilled to have Jim Toia, who's the Executive Director of the Karl Stirner Arts Trail, with us today. Thanks, Jim. I did want to just let you know that our mission is to serve our arts and culture community by driving creative programming, providing valuable resources, and cultivating connections. But really, we envision a community where arts and culture is critical, where creatives can thrive, and where all people connect through the arts. And back in 2018, we did launch the Summit County's first ever cultural plan. And this was community driven and it's community owned while we manage it. But, you know, I mean, we had people from the nonprofit sector, business sector, government leaders, all weigh in and give their opinions during this cultural planning process. And it resulted in a lot of collective priorities and kind of a roadmap for us to see development and progress in the arts and culture sector. And so these conversations are one of the ways that we implement the plan and we keep momentum. It's not just a plan that collects dust on a shelf, let's say. So I'm going to pitch it over to Jake McIntyre. Jake McIntyre is a consultant for the Arts Council and has been since 2017 and works with us on a variety of projects. He does have his own company, Union Creative Agency, and he's wonderful. Many of you know him. And he's going to give you a little bit more background, and then we're going to get into some additional background about the rail trail before Jim gets started.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jocelyn. So as Jocelyn said, I'm a consultant working with the Arts Council and have been for a number of years now and help facilitate the Project ABC cultural plan, and now really work to support the Arts Council in overseeing the implementation of that plan. And as Jocelyn said, that's a community-owned plan, but I and myself and the Arts Council really work to think about how are we making sure that that plan is not gathering dust, right? How are we making sure that it's proceeding forward? And these community convenings are a major way that we're able to keep the conversation going. One of the things that we find in kind of cultural planning processes or long-term planning processes is that oftentimes the conversation during is as important as the end result. And one thing that we found as we were coming out of this process was the community was really hungry for conversations about the role arts and culture could play in the community. And so this is our way of, while the planning process is, we could say done, right? It's never really done, but we've at least kind of captured it or codified it. Now we're ready to be into implementation, but we want to keep these conversations going. We want to stay connected to you all. Just flipping through the attendees list, I know many of you were involved in a lot of those planning processes. So this is our way of keeping that conversation fresh, keeping it going. I'm really excited about today's conversation. I remember thinking about the rail trail corridor as this kind of possible connective tissue or conduit that could link multiple parts of the county, integrating arts and culture into that. I mean, I remember talking about that with Hadley, former director of the Arts Council, and Randy Barton, who kind of helped spearhead or kick off Project ABC. I mean, I think that was talked about in one of some of the earliest conversations that I had with them, probably early 2017. So it's awesome to see that folks at Summit County have really got this project, some momentum behind it, and now we're able to facilitate this conversation today. And really start thinking critically about how could arts and culture help to facilitate this wonderful connective tissue that can unite these different parts of the county in a really thoughtful and authentic and meaningful way. And I'm so excited to have Jim with us today. As we were doing research on other trail systems and the way arts can connect to nature, connect to trails, the Karl Stirner Arts Trail stood out in a lot of ways, but one was kind of the sensitivity to the way that the artwork is integrated into the landscape or connecting with the landscape. There's kind of a balance between work that feels bold and energetic and work that is really soft and sensitive. And I loved that balance and those kind of the thoughtfulness in which public art was being thought about in connection to the trail system. So it seemed like a great example. And Jim, I'm really grateful to you for being with us today and sharing your insights. And yeah, I think with that, we can probably pass on and get started. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, so I think what we'll do is invite Madeline McDonough and Pat Putt to join the conversation quickly. I think it's important to maybe provide some context as to why this conversation might be relevant. And Maddie and Pat, of course, are Summit County employees, and they've been working really closely on the Rail Trail Corridor project. And so maybe take 5 minutes, you guys, and maybe just give a quick overview about where you are in this corridor development plan, how you've done community engagement, where you are in the process, and how arts and culture might be relevant. Something super high level, and we'll get into that after more in a deeper way after Jim's presentation. So take it, you two.
Thanks, Jocelyn. My name is Maddie McDonough. I'm a planner in the Summit County Community Development Department, and I'm managing the county's community engagement and planning efforts along the historic Union Pacific Rail Trail corridor from where it crosses 248 all the way to the end at Echo Reservoir. We're really excited to be here today and to be talking about this. Pat is going to give us a little bit of background on the trail as well as its connection to arts and culture, and then I will share where we are in the community engagement process.
Thanks, Maddie. Patrick Putt, I'm the Community Development Director for Summit County. I can't be more excited about, we have almost looks like 50 people here this morning. And for me, this conversation has a lot to do with planning, what Maddie and I do 60 hours a week in art, and is there a relationship? And I feel like we've arrived. I've been doing this for a little bit. You may be familiar with some of my original master planning work. There was a cave in France, the Lascaux cave. And a lot of people thought, that was fairly interesting. That wasn't just art. That was my internship master plan. That was where I first had my first foray in, should art be a part of how we design communities? And people never really understood that. About 3 decades ago, I came to work for Park City. And when I arrived at the Marsac building, they were in the middle of hanging a bunch of public art in the hallways. And I got really excited about that. And I ran and I got my dogs playing poker poster and I put it up. And I got a lot of lot of trouble over that. Today is my redemption to be allowed to come back and talk about the link between art and planning. And is there a link between art and planning? Absolutely. Why? Art is all about telling a story, and it's about telling who we are. And so the question isn't really, should art be a part of our community design discussion? It's absolutely, how does it become a viable piece of our community planning and our community design? And so I thank Jocelyn and Jake and all of you guys for coming here this morning to help us participate in that discussion. Folks like Maddie and I stand on the shoulders of giants. What we're talking about with this corridor plan is not the first time people have thought about the rail trail. One of those people here today, I'm going to call him out, is Dick Stoner. Dick is a member of a core group of individuals who kind of had the aha moment well over 30 years ago. So Dick, thank you for persevering with this. What Maddie and I are working on is taking Dick's energy and Dick's idea and making it a bit more holistic, potentially. We see this exercise as a chance to holistically think about a 30-mile corridor, not just from the standpoint of this current recreation amenity that people love and people are beginning to understand how wonderful it is, but begin to think about what happens along that entire route. We have no less than 5, well, if you include Atkinson, we have 6 communities, historic communities from Park City to Echo, each with their own different identity, each with their own story, each with their own aspirations. And as Jake said, this is our chance to thread those together, to create the connection between East and West that maybe hasn't always materialized in the way we wanted. This is a way, and for sure, including the arts and culture, how we holistically put together a strategy to think about community recreation, community open space, environmental health, incubating opportunities for local creatives, whether they be in the business or the arts, giving an opportunity for places like Wanship and Hoytsville and Colville and Echo a chance to rethink themselves, and rather just having their back to the corridor, have an element of themselves that addresses them in their own unique way. And so what Maddie's been working on for the last year, and I got to really applaud her, the energy that she has brought, is taking some of these ideas and begin to form a strategy. And she's had great help. I think Sophie is on the call with us today. One last thing, and then I'll turn it over to her. A lot of times we think planning is fairly static. It's a dealing and managing problems we have now and issues. Planning is an active word. It's a verb. It's thinking forward. And what Maddie has done successfully is brought the people of the future into this process. We have folks like Sophie from the University of Utah, who grew up here her entire life. We have PC CAPS students involved with this. We have the people who will inherit our future involved in this. And I couldn't be more excited to be part of this discussion. I guarantee I'll learn more than I'll say, but maybe what I'll do is turn it back over to Maddie just to have her walk you through the work and the engagement we've done thus far.
Thanks. I'm feeling really good about myself right now, so that's awesome. We are in the midst of gathering community input for the vision and goals of the future of the trail and the surrounding corridor. So just a brief update. We've had really great community response thus far. We had a survey that had 479 responses with really amazing input and information. We've had one open house so far that's helped us come to sort of a draft vision and goals for this corridor. And then we have our next open house coming up really soon on Monday, March 14th at 6 p.m. at the Basin Rec offices. You can see a summary of the community engagement so far, as well as information about this next open house on our project website. I'll put that in the chat. And we are looking forward to hearing what everyone has to say today and add to our planning process. I think this is going to be great. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Maddie. Well, that was great context. Thanks, you too. And just for all attendees, we are going to come back to some of our community roundtable panelists after Jim's presentation to kind of, I don't know, just talk about it as a community. And we have a lot of amazing participants that are going to be participating in that conversation, and hopefully questions from you all that you'll be providing in the chat. So we'll bring Maddie and Pat back on in a little bit, but I think without further ado, we'll invite Jim Toia, who is the Executive Director of the Karl Stirner Arts Trail, to start his presentation. And I think, I think we're all a little Zoom fatigued sometimes, but the one silver lining is we have Jim joining us all the way from Easton, Pennsylvania, to be able to speak with us in person today. So thanks so much for joining, Jim, and I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Jocelyn, and thank you, Jake, for inviting me. Thank you all for being here. It's very exciting to be here and have this opportunity to share with you. And already what you've said has sparked so much interest and thoughts on how to continue to contribute to the conversation. So once this conversation is over and we get through the weekend, I hope you feel comfortable to reach out to me at any time in the future. A quick little view about myself. I'm a sculptor. Primarily, I work with nature using processes and structures that I find in nature as both inspiration and subject matter to work with. So, and I've been doing that for about 30 something years. So I've always been sensitive to the environment and tried to find ways to celebrate what is there in front of us and what has history to it already. So some of the things that you guys have already spoken about and the fact of where you're located really speaks to an exciting time for you. It sounds like you guys are really on a great path. You've already started to think about and have been thinking about all the crucial aspects to what makes a community thrive and flourish in using nature and the arts to bring people together. So I applaud you all for all of that work. I think Pat said it started, and Jake said something like it started 30 years ago with the vision of Dick Stoner, which is pretty impressive. I will add that we started this idea or thinking about this idea about 20 years ago, and we're on only a 1.6 mile long trail. So there's a little bit more work that you guys have ahead of you than we were able to bite off and chew quite quickly. And it still took us 20 years. So I'm going to, can I go ahead and share my screen? I think I'm going to need to do that. You're going to need to give me permission to do that. But it's very, very exciting to be here. Thank you. Thank you so much. I know it's early for you guys, so I'm impressed that you're all up and about already.
Jim, it looks like you should have access now. Let me know.
Yep, I got it.
Go ahead.
Great. So I'm going to try to run through things pretty quickly. The Arts Trail is 1.6 miles long, as I said, and it's part of obviously a much bigger picture, just like your guys' ideas are, and your trail is. It's much bigger than what we're dealing with. But we have. Let's see, why is this not going? Come on, there you go. We're located in a really interesting position. We're in Easton, Pennsylvania, which is a small city of about 25,000 people, but we're directly west of Manhattan by about 72 miles and directly north of Philadelphia by about 73 miles. So we're well located in a much more kind of city environment, urban environment. Easton is a small city. It's got a lot of wonderful infrastructure. A lot of artists started moving here about 30 years ago, just because the infrastructure was so good and it was a lot cheaper than living in Manhattan or Philadelphia with a lot more space around. what you're seeing in front of you is, this is the Arts Trail. It runs along the Bushkill Creek, which goes into the Delaware River. It's part of a larger set of trails throughout Easton, which run up the Lehigh River on its way to Bethlehem and Allentown, Pennsylvania, and Humor Park, which is another park on our in our city. But for the most part, what we're going to be talking about today is the distance between the Silk Mill and the eastern edge of the Arts Trail. As far as what we've been focusing on primarily, it is part of a larger group of trails that are linked in the area and move all throughout the Northampton County community and well beyond. And we're also part of the Two Rivers Trailway, which is a national, a state and nationally recognized trailway system. Having a little trouble getting this to go. There we go. Quickly, we're created through a few different groups. Our board of governance has a wide variety of individuals with a vastly wide range of expertise, from economists to director of African Studies at Lafayette College, where we're located adjacent to the college, and that's one of our main collaborators. So there are a number of people from Lafayette who have expertise in a number of things, but we also have people from the community, relationships with a lot of organizations nearby. This is the general structure, just for your guys' awareness. We have an executive board of 4 people and a board of directors, which is up to about 18 people now, that I answer to as the executive director. We are closely related with the city of Easton. Our land that we have our trail on is owned by the city of Easton, which is very important because they maintain it for the most part and assist us in installing artwork, dealing with the primary insurance liabilities, things like that. So it really helps to have that. We don't have any brick and mortar, so that keeps our costs down as a 501c3. We have an arts advisory committee, which the council actually stretches all the way throughout the country, from the West Coast down south. The board of directors, Dan Weiss from the Metropolitan Museum Art is on our advisory board, as well as a number of other executive directors of museums and other parks. We also have a committee from Lafayette College, which is mostly faculty members who use the trail and use the river as a study environment. So that's a lovely opportunity. And then we have a group of people that are friends of the trail that help us with a wide variety of events and projects that happen on the trail. There we go. Our mission, as stated here, is to enhance the public's imagination through the placement of artwork in a transcendent natural setting. We are completely dedicated to advancing civic dialogue, promoting ambient value and creative capital that we can bring to the community, bolstering economic revitalization, fostering civic and cultural values, certainly environmental sustainability, and public stewardship of an urban green infrastructure, connecting to our larger region. Come on. Some reason I'm having a little bit of trouble advancing sometimes. My apologies. So just to finish up, sorry, that's the wrong slide. So the Karl Stirner Arts Trail, I'll just read it, aspires to define the city of Easton's commitment to the arts as a major part of the city's identity and character. We seek to create a distinctive place for sponsoring educational and cultural moments in partnership with the diverse communities that we are part of, that are part of Easton's vitality. Ultimately, we aspire to become a national destination for the viewing and communion with art in the natural environment. So in terms of the history, how we got started, there was a way back in 2004, and even before that, the city of Easton and Lafayette College were awarded a $9 million Pennsylvania redevelopment assistance grant. And we used that to help to clean up and develop a silk mill, which is here. Sorry about that. Silk mill, which is on the western edge of our trail, 330,000 square feet of silk mill space in 11 different buildings. And Lafayette College, which you can see here on the eastern edge, down at the base of College Hill is 3rd Street. And that was not in the best of repair. So we developed that and then formed a trail that ran between Silk Mill, which was going to be a residential and commercial venue, with the idea that there'd be a connective link back to downtown Easton, which is just over here. So it's, by the time you get into the center of Easton, it's about a 2-mile walk from Silk, a lovely walk along the Bushkill Creek and along the trail. So all of those things got developed over time. This is what the trail kind of looked like beforehand. There's a cemetery adjacent to the trail, which is a historic cemetery, but it was in fair disrepair, and the city needed to do a lot of cleanup and about $3 million worth of work to bring it to the place where we could connect those two parcels. And the city council was the genesis of that request to put together a group of citizens who would make this happen. I'm not going to go through those details, but this is our namesake, Karl Stirner, who was a real wonderful cheerleader of arts in Easton and brought a lot of people from Philadelphia and Manhattan out here to look at Easton and consider it as an art center, which it became over about 30 years. Mayor Panto, who is our mayor again now, was very instrumental in making this work, as was Becky Bradley, who was the city administrator at the time. This is one of the first pieces that was put on the trail. Karl was in the process of making this piece when the mayor asked him if he wouldn't mind being the namesake for the trail. This was at 81 years old. He had just finished this sculpture. He worked primarily in steel. And it was a wonderful way to start things off. Once that happened in 2011, we worked towards bringing more art onto the trail. And in 2016, we received our 501c3 status. Got lots of collaborators, which are so important for you guys and for every trail, I would say. We work with Lafayette College, as I said, the Cemetery of Easton, the City of Easton, Silk, which is the mill that I was speaking of, Nurture Nature Center, which is a wonderful environmental center in Easton, the Allentown Museum, which is only about 15 miles west of us, Grounds for Sculpture, which is another art park and trail in Hamilton, New Jersey, a little further away, and then a number of local businesses and community groups, which are really, really important to us. It's so important for us to have those links and relationships. I also serve on the Greater Easton Development Partnership, which oversees how businesses in Easton are integrating and helping to create more visitation to the town and a healthy economic environment. So our goals are art, health and mindfulness, which is really important, especially today, nature, history, environment, a space for all, and a green museum. And we think of this as a green museum to emphasize the idea that we are out in nature and we don't want our community to forget that, nor do we want any of our curators to forget that. So the river does help to define this space in a very significant way. This piece that you see here, these are a number of buoys that are hung, suspended down off of a bridge that the river runs under. This is by Stacy Levy, who's a Pennsylvania artist. And when this river floods, these buoys move up with the water level and really heighten the public's awareness of the severity of flooding that can happen in our region, because we're on the Delaware River. We're in a gorged environment, which is, it's subject to flooding. So Stacy did a piece here that really called attention to the flux that occurs in the environment. And it's frightening and beautiful when you see those buoys horizontal at the top of that arch. It's pretty scary. But we do a wide variety of public engagement on the trail. This was during Halloween. We were getting prepared for a pumpkin carving that we did on the trail. We have a public park area, which is the only kind of wide space on the trail. And we do movies on the trail in the summer. It brings a great amount of people out, and you can't really tell, but there's a nice hill that everyone can sit on and picnic on. We usually have some music beforehand, and then 2 or 3, maybe 4 movies on the trail throughout the summer. So yeah, we think about the environment. We think about this space as a natural laboratory, so that we can do research there through the college, through Nurture Nature Center, and educational enlightenment about what happens on the trail, what happens in the river, and how do we understand the health of the environment through these signs that we see on the river and on the trail. Nurture Nature wrote a grant to create a number of journaling stations throughout Easton. This is one that's on the trail. It teaches people how to kind of sit and calmly contemplate nature. We provide these little nature journaling books and pencils in a little compartment on the opposite side of this bench. And anyone can come and sit down and learn, how do you do these? How do you do journaling, and what does it do to help you just sit and contemplate? And it's a really lovely way to get people to stop and think and absorb. So yeah, we think of this as a place for reflection, place to gather, recreate, and nurture one's spirit. This Labyrinth was installed in 2018 as part of our mindfulness zone. You can kind of see the sloping hill on your right-hand side. This is where the movies would be and where the people sit on this hill. But just up from there, 100 yards or so, is a labyrinth. Behind the labyrinth, it's hard to see, but this is a community project that was done by a number of people who proposed it. It's a willow grove that's a woven arch that a path leads to, and it provides great shading in the summer and an interesting environment. So this is kind of our area to slow down and to start to contemplate things within your own mind and think about the health and the physicality of your body and your awareness there. And just east of that is our musical path, which we thought it would be really interesting and important not to just have art on the trail that's visual art, but also musical opportunities. So these chimes were designed by a group of students from Lafayette College who were engineering students and photographers and artists, and they came up with a design to create these chimes, and we got a grant to build these. And this section, if played from left to right, plays Beethoven's Fur Elise. So da 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 da. So we thought, well, if a little 3-year-old picks up one of these mallets and just runs down along, hitting these chimes, they're going to play a song. So it was a great opportunity to kind of heighten people's awareness, auditory awareness of their experience, any experiential moment on the trail, and then riff on that, do whatever they want to change that and bring and kind of expand on that as just a percussive moment. But we do think that art is the glue. This is Sam Van Aken on our right-hand side. He's an artist from Reddington, Pennsylvania, originally, who teaches at Syracuse University now. And this is his tree of 40 fruits. And he worked with his grandfather when he was young to understand how to graft different types of stone fruits onto a plum stock. And we commissioned Sam to do one of his trees of 40 fruit and plant it here on the trail. So now every fall, a number of different fruits spring off this tree, cherries, any stone fruit. So they're peaches, plums, cherries, and it's quite wild to see 20 or 30 different fruits growing on one tree. So it's a wonderful living sculpture, and it's also an opportunity to teach people about pruning and about caring for trees. These are all native to the area. All of these plum stalks and any of these stone fruits are heritage stone fruits that were indigenous to the area. And Sam does his research to find the particular fruits that work for a particular zone. So we did workshops about grafting, about planting, about fruit trees, about canning, all those types of things. It's a great opportunity to advance the dialogue about what art can be and push that further. This is a Steve Tobin work in the front of us. And this is the Karl Stirner Arch. Steve Tobin and Karl were very good friends. Steve was a protege of Karl's, and earlier in our about 4 years ago, George Ball, who is the CEO of Burpee Seed Company, gifted us 11 of Steve Tobin's work, which all relates to tree roots and growth of seed construction. So we were gifted 11 different sculptures and placed a number of them on the trail and then around the Easton community, as not to turn this into the Steve Tobin Trail, but it afforded us a great kind of profile and changed the dynamic of what the trail was in terms of our art holdings and the way we could allow other areas and other groups to borrow work. This is another one of Tobin's pieces called Black Steel Root. This piece is bronze, and it's a sycamore root. So I'm not going to spend much time on where we're headed, but it's important to continue to raise our profile. We do that through Twitter and Instagram, our website, and Facebook. We continue to partner with many stakeholders in the area who are like-minded. And we continue to bring new projects onto the trail. Brandon Ballinger did a wonderful piece for the trail, which we've recently purchased and are going to reinstall. This is called the Love Bug Motel for insects. And it's not, Brandon is a biologist and a sculptor. And this piece is intended to attract insects at night. So this lights up as it starts to get dark and provides opportunity for biologists, entomologists, and school groups to actually come in the evening, see what kind of bugs are hanging out on this sculpture, and actually get a good sense of the biodiversity that exists here on the trail and along the Bushkill Creek. And it really helps us understand about the health of the creek and our community, if there are any insects that are missing that are normally there, or if there are any invasive species that are threatening the environment. This really helps us to understand those dynamics. And we've done projects with it. We did a community event called the Bug Symposium, which really brought together a broad group of people, including Trout Unlimited and hydrologists from the region. We talked all about the river and its health through that piece. And you can see that piece in the background now. We did a barbecue, and This is Mike Raup, who's an entomologist who brought a bunch of live bugs. That's about a 6-inch stick bug that some of our guests who were part of the barbecue got to engage with. And then a number of other pieces have gone up on the trail. This is Rachel Hayes from Tulsa, Oklahoma, who did a site-specific series of pieces, 19 different pieces on the trail that were a temporary exhibition about 2 summers ago. And they were very active, very kinetic, beautiful works that lasted for a couple of years there. We do a lot of annual events. This is our annual winter solstice, where people walk the trail. The bugler in town comes and songs are sung. It's a really lovely evening. This is the Red Sand Project from Molly Glockman, where we bring community members in to help us fill these cracks in the blacktop with red sand. And this is a project that brings awareness about indigenous cultures and people who are being lost and kidnapped throughout the world, mostly women and children who fall through the cracks. And Molly Glockman has created this wonderful red sand project that happens around the world. We've created a permanent installation, and every year we add to that by increasing the amount of sand along the cracks throughout the trail. And that's something we do during Indigenous Community Month, which is October. And I'm almost finished, so. We asked Habib Fall, who's a young artist in our region, to do a Black Lives Matter freedom fighters mural. I mean, his idea to use the subject freedom fighters. It's right at the beginning of the pandemic, and we thought, and the BLM movement, and we thought it was really important to allow that voice to be articulated in a great way. This is the entirety of the mural. It's about 100 feet long. It has images of James Baldwin, Angela Davis, and Harriet Tubman, along with images of people moving through the Underground Railroad, along with some abstractions on it. And we enlisted the help of the Boys and Girls Club in the region to help Habib paint it. So he mapped it all out, and then we brought other people in to help collaborate on this work. And we have our annual Come As You Art Halloween Parade. This was our first year doing it. It was a really fun event, and a bunch of kids came. Wasn't a huge event this year, but I imagine next year it's going to grow and grow as we progress. But it was a fun little way to get the younger kids involved. I didn't show you the Young Masters Wall, which is another thing that happens on a monthly basis, where we bring students in and kids from different regions and communities, Boys and Girls Club, Girl Scouts, things like that. And they are able to put their artistic talents to the public. We just had this bridge put in a year ago, and this links us directly to Silk Mill, which is a really wonderful engagement. So I'm going to just let that go at this point. There are a number of other things happening on the trail, but I could answer questions for you guys as we go along. I'm sure you have plenty of questions, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I thank you for your interest. You can reach me at jimtoia@gmail.com or info@Karl Stirner Arts Trail if you want to continue a conversation. And I'll take questions, and we can move along as you guys need to. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much, Jim. I I'm obsessed with a lot of these projects that you have worked on, and so inspired to see. I know we've been doing a lot of research on your trail, but just through this presentation, I've seen artwork that I hadn't seen before, and it's definitely, yes, Nan in the chat is saying it feels a lot of great ideas. And so I think at this point, first of all, thank you so much for that. I think that provides a lot of background and again, idea sharing and thought partnership for to help, I don't know, kind of get our roundtable panelists together. And so I think at this point, we will invite anyone from any of our attendees to put questions in the chat. If you have questions for Jim, and while we are accepting questions, we will invite our roundtable to unmute themselves and bring your cameras back online, and we can start some roundtable discussion. I do have some comments that I'd love to share with you, Jim. David Nicholas says, amazing, inspiring, engaging experience. I want to go. Vicky Borns, love this trail. And then she asks, how is the art project and staffing at O&M funded? I'm thinking maybe that's Karl Stirner.
Operations and
Operations and management. There you go.
Yeah. It's been up to this point mostly private funding. We've been able to fulfill some grants through writing for specific grants, but we have had a number of families who had helped us initially to create funding for an administrative assistant first. I mean, we operated for about 8 years without any real funding and just volunteer work, which says a lot about the commitment of the community and the belief in the arts trail. But of course, we had the support of the city, and then through my connections and some of the other board members' connections, we were able to get works donated to the trail, and then the city. The city is really wonderful. I mean, we're really lucky. We have a great public works department with a number of people who are really interested in the arts and are very caring about the way art is installed. So we can trust them to help us move work. But when you have a specific project in mind, like when we were bringing all the George Ball sculptures of Steve Tobin's work up, we had a good idea of what it was going to cost to bring them up through trucking, and we were able to go out to the community and look for resources to fund that. And then about 3 years ago, a couple of families came up with funding that they could provide us for about 4 years to help us develop to the point where we could start to really engage a grant writer and actually pay to have an executive director, curator. I mean, I wear both those hats as executive director and chief curator of the trail, but I do rely heavily on others in the community and the region to help me with curatorial ideas. Like next 2023, we're going to be doing our first biennial, and it'll be small. It's going to be about 5 to 10 artists, but we're working through state and local grants to provide us with the funding. And it's a tourism funding grant. You just have to prove that you're bringing people to the region, and that's we got a smaller grant this year, and I anticipate we'll be able to get a much larger grant to make that happen. But you have to be really flexible, and you have to kind of identify those potential resources out there, and then think about what the project is you want to do and who might be interested in working with that. Like with Brandon Ballinger's Love Motel for insects, that was that's a real environmental project. So we are thinking about who do we go to, who can we tap, who would be really interested in this type of environmental work. So depending on what the project and the sculpture or the program is really will help you determine if there are particular resources for you to go forward with, and tap.
Thanks, Jim.
Sure.
We have another comment from Julianne. Love the solstice, Indigenous, and really all of your projects that bring the community together. I do see a hand raised from Christine. If you're willing to put your question in the chat, if you still have a question, feel free to do so, and we will get to it soon. But I did want to, first of all, welcome our roundtable panelists. So every time we host a community convening, it's always sectioned out into these kind of two separate areas. We have usually our host guest, and they give our presentations, but the meat of the conversation, I think, are these roundtables when we bring the community together and find relatable content, discuss what's sticking, where are we feeling inspired from that presentation, where does that presentation, how does that not fit with Summit County? And so this is really the important part of the discussion, and so we're really grateful to our roundtable panelists from our Summit County community. We have Heinrich Dieters, who is the Trails and Open Space Manager at Park City Municipal. We have Maddie McDonough back, who's a county planner with Summit County. Pat Putt, who's our Community Development Director at Summit County. We have Dick Stoner on the call, who's a Summit County resident. Lynn Wood, who's a Colville resident and member of the North Summit Unite group. We're also welcoming Sophie Frankenberg, who is a graduate student at the University of Utah and has been working closely with Summit County on the corridor project. And we're also thrilled to have Chris Klein, who is the environmental contaminants and restoration specialist, I hope I'm getting this right, at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service through the Utah Ecological Services Field Office, and then of course, Jim, Jake, and I. So we are going to kind of help lead this conversation and kind of discuss how this presentation relates to Summit County. But again, I can't reiterate this enough. If you have questions, please, and we also have Q&A available as well. So it looks like we've got some of that coming in. Please put them in those areas, and we will address them as we go. I do have a comment from Suzanne Marr, so inspiring. Can't wait to see and experience the trail and installations in person across the river in Washington Borough. Grassroots installation of the trails at recently acquired last open space with council's approval. No money and limited volunteers. Thanks for that comment. Tom Fisher, who is our county manager, did put a question in the Q&A. For the 30-mile rail trail in Summit County, what is the diversity of desires for trail amenity or highlight based on the area of the county? To follow that question, what is the best way to honor all of the diversity of that desire? Thanks, Tom. So maybe we use that to kick off our discussion. So talking, and maybe this is pointed at Maddie and Pat, since you've been talking to so many community members and you've been gathering a lot of data from community members on some of these desires for trail amenities. So what is coming to the forefront? What are you guys hearing after all of that data gathering?
Maddie, you want to field that one?
Yeah, we've heard a lot of different ideas and different desires. Some of the consistent ones that we've heard are access to facilities, so restrooms, water, things like that, and making the trail itself a little bit more approachable. So including signage that would indicate how far you are from certain destinations would be really helpful. Right now, it's such a long stretch that it can be sometimes difficult to understand where you are along the trail. And along with that signage, sort of indicating where you might get off the trail to be able to take advantage of some local businesses and amenities that already exist. So for example, when you're in Colville, and a sign indicating get off here to go to the main street is something that's come up. We've had some comments about, the maintenance of the trail itself in terms of who's using it. So making sure that it's accessible for bike riders, as well as pedestrians, as well as horse and equestrian riders in different parts of the trail. And we're just taking in all of this information so that we can plan for a future where trail users can work harmoniously and there isn't any conflict between users, and we're able to highlight some of this existing infrastructure of these historic towns or cities along the trail. That's what's coming to mind for me. Did you have anything else, Pat?
No, I think you really covered the high points, but a phenomenal amount of input and response for a survey, which to me suggests there's great interest in this idea.
Yeah, Jocelyn, can I take a shot at it
Go
real
ahead.
quick? Just so I can at least plug our planning process and keep people involved. So my name's Heinrich Dieters. I work for Park City Municipal. Similar to Pat and Maddie, we are looking at just a 3-mile stretch of the rail trail. So if you're familiar with the area from Bonanza out to 248. I've known Pat for a long time. I'll make you smile, Pat, a little bit. And I think Pat and I over the years have always, thought that the rail trail is such a great amenity. And I've sat and had breakfast in Sally Elliott's house with Dick Stoner, and we would all be remiss if we didn't thank the people who actually had the original vision back in the late 80s. And I saw a chat come up, and I think it's also important to acknowledge that the state park, this is a state park, and the state really held this rail trail together over this last 30 years. And that's important because rail trails throughout the nation can be bifurcated or sold or stretched. So we're extremely lucky to be in the position that we are now. I want to say that if you're interested in following the Park City planning process, we have a Park City Engage page. And if I was more technically savvy, I'd put it in the chat, but I will work on that, Jocelyn. But that is a website that you can follow the Park City planning process. So we've been in our planning process for about a year. I bugged my council about it for probably 10 years. But some maintenance aspects, specifically in safety associated with the actually surface, the asphalt, things like that, really sort of drove the residents who utilize that section a lot to go to council and say, hey, look, we want to have a discussion on if we can improve the maintenance management, et cetera. So that was my council direction almost 1 year ago. And so what we've done, Park City, that is, over the past year, is we've done 2 surveys and held 1 open house. And Maddie, I'm not trying to trump you, but we just got 1,000 on our last survey, which I was extremely excited about. We're about to close that sort of community input section because we feel like, our first approach was, we just want to hear from you. A lot of our citizens was like, what are you asking? And we're like, it's an open slate. You just tell us, how do you use it? How often do you use it? Why do you like it? Why do you not like it? Our most recent survey built on the first one and basically led to a little bit, I think Jim or someone was speaking to, or maybe Tom, amenities. What do you want to see? What do you not want to see? So we are right now, I think I saw the consultant put all of that information together, and we're going to post that on that just raw data on our Engage page. But that's kind of where we are at the process in looking at our Park City section. I want to give a little bit of an insight. We've heard a lot about the environmental aspect. We have, Silver Creek runs through there. A lot of people are very interested in how we can either enhance the wetlands in that area, improve the stream corridor, improve maybe access from even a mobility disability standpoint for users, so they can, benefit in that environmental aspect. And we have heard a ton about the cultural and historical side. And there are some limited markers and information that are out there. My favorite is out in Atkinson. Actually, Pat, when I take my family out there, my son cannot believe that there's actually a town out there where there's nothing. But we can improve on that. So we're hearing sort of the same things. I think 2 things I'd like to plug. Last year we had a drought year, and many of you maybe on this call will remember this, but there was a panelized van that was stuck in the creek, sort of by our Quinn's water treatment plant for years. It's been there for 30 years. And with the drought, we actually had an opportunity to maybe pull that out of there because we had some requests, you know, hey, can you pull the broken down car out of the stream? It kind of, it's a little contrary to what we're trying to accomplish. But the point being, it was like accidental art for some of us. We pulled it out and we thought, you know, this is just going to go to the dump. But I'm not a car enthusiast, but you know, it's supposedly some type of automobile that is rare. But what we found is sketched on the side of it was Park City Arts Festival with an arrow from about the 80s. And we dragged it out and we put it like by the side of the trail. And from day one, everyone stopped and we were having more and more and people were calling and, oh, I remember the truck. And this is what is, oh, that's the old Arts Fest truck. And so what, you know, myself, you know, who I rely on Jenny Dearson as sort of the arts director for Park City Municipal, but it really dawned on me that how important the cultural and artistic aspects and the experiences that people can have on the trail. So, you know, that was one aspect. And, you know, I think one fantastic opportunity where sort of the Park City planning aspect and the Summit County aspect there at 248, you know, we have had numerous requests over the years for a pedestrian safety overcross there. And, you know, we're searching out, you know, funds to possibly provide that. I want to thank Summit County on this. Tom Fisher is on. We got a grant for the rail trail. Might not actually meet all the way to provide that overpass, but that is a great opportunity for us as a community to look at what that design of that bridge, because that will be a very iconic aspect of that trail. Very much like I think somebody said, the bridge that is an echo. It's just an absolutely beautiful structure. And so I look forward to working with everybody probably on this call on not only the rail trail in our corridor, but, you know, probably several year interest in looking at what that overpass might look like. So thanks for that opportunity.
Part of the earlier question had to do with sort of the cultural elements. We believe the success of this initiative is going to look a lot like being able to draw out from those roughly 5 or 6 communities how they define themselves and where they see their history and where they see their future. One thing I'm pretty certain of is whether you live here or you visit here, you have one common strand in your DNA. You're looking for the authentic. And I feel in our resort community environment as a whole in the Mountain West, we're struggling with that. For years, I believe people, when it was, you know, the corridor, the trail, they got as far out as the crossing at SR 248. And it was though the map had dragons on it, right? And those dragons back in the days when like the medieval cartographers didn't know what was out there, they just painted a serpent or a monster or a dragon. Part of the goal here, I think, is to begin to erase those dragon icons on our map and be able to work with the local communities and beginning to define themselves in their own authentic way. Wanship is one of the things I learned when I came to the county. Wanship has a very different history than Hoytsville, than does Colville, than does Echo. When I figured that out, sort of the light came on for me. And part of this exercise is to get people drawn out to help us understand that. And how do we celebrate that? I mean, there's so many ways. There's the historical part of it. There's the visual part of it. There's the performing part of it. There's the passive environmental part of it. I was struck when Jim showed the Love Motel. I mean, what an interesting way to take an environmental aspect and turn it into something that draws people as well as bugs. I had this image in my head of something similar, Jim, where we could plagiarize that. We could have our own Love Motel and maybe bring the symphony in to do covers of Barry White tunes or something like that. You know, the possibilities are endless. The key is engaging local residents to help define it for themselves. I think that's where we're going to be successful if we can do that.
Thanks, Pat. As maybe a next question to our other panelists here, I'm curious, as you listen to Jim present today, if there were any other projects that really stood out to you, felt maybe particularly relevant as something interesting we could pull from. Obviously, the goal is not to just replicate what's being done, but I'm curious if there were particular projects that stood out to anyone, and maybe some of the panelists we haven't heard from yet today.
Yeah, I'm kind of going to build off of some of the previous comments and questions that were just asked, but obviously so many great ideas, and the Summit County Rail Trail Corridor Plan will probably be showcasing the Karl Stirner Trail as a case study in our final document. It's just really inspiring and very cool. I think that what we are kind of being tasked with is how to balance the cultural and the environmental with art installations. And I think that sometimes installation is a little bit of a trigger word for people, because they want the trail to stay natural and stay in, a more primitive area. And perhaps, Jim, you could shine some light on how to incorporate kind of these placemaking art pieces, and also respecting the wishes of the community and how they want to see the future of their open spaces.
Sure. And that's a great point. And quite often, and we on the Arts Trail, the value of having a university or college nearby and having all these academics who are thinking about things on a broader and a larger scale than we might individually is always helpful. And we had an anthropologist and a sociologist who was saying, hey, it's really great. You guys are doing really well. And there's all these people coming to the trail. I mean, in 2019, we had 60,000 people visit the trail because we have a trail counter. And then once COVID hit, the next year we had 120,000. So, I mean, it doubled because so many people were coming to the trail. And you have to be sensitive about the impact that you're having on the trail. And that goes for community members who don't want the trail packed full, your trail or any trail, packed full of stuff that they don't really understand or doesn't feel like it fits. But there are a tremendous amount of ways to have a very light touch that is still highly informative, and maybe moments that punctuate some specific that has to do with geology or a river system or a historic moment. And there are thousands of artists out there that are doing things that are performative or auditory, that don't have it's not a big sculpture being plopped on a piece of land. It's maybe a panel or a post that has a motion detector on it, and when someone walks by it, a very quiet story about that location comes up from a poet, or a performance artist does a work that just happens for a day that's moving along the trail, talking about the history of that space. And those types of engagements really, they do, link the community in, and especially if you start to bring some type of conversation in as part of that programming, invite, historians or community members who happen to have a link to that experiential moment. When we did the symposium for the Bug Motel, we brought TU members and Trout Unlimited members who were talking about the fish in the river and the the migratory aspect of them and the bugs and what the trout eat and all those things. But then we had a roundtable discussion that invited the public in, where we just sat on the grass and talked about what they saw, what these people saw, and we had young kids and we had 85-year-olds who had been fishing the river for 60 years, talking about the way things had changed. And we recorded that so that there was documentation of that could then be linked onto a website or a blog post. So there are all kinds of ways that don't have to threaten the physicality of the space in a way. So I would encourage you to talk to curators that are, from all over the place, as well as the community. I think you guys are right. You need to find out what the community wants, but you also have to think about how to engage the community and enlighten them beyond what their expectations are. I think that's really important because you don't want to lose them in a highfalutin conversation, but you want to engage them and enlighten them in a way like the Bug Motel. I mean, it's like, who thought about, oh, geez, if I just look at this, if I see this bug and an entomologist there says, whoa, I've never seen that bug in this region before, that's a threat right there. All of a sudden the community gets concerned about, oh my gosh, are we out of balance? And they start to understand a lot more of those dynamics. So yeah, I spoke a long time, sorry, but I get excited about these things. There's a tremendous amount of opportunity out there that doesn't have to, be that big stamp. That's like that traditional art park sculpture. Not that I
Jim,
don't.
just one quick, I want to note, I think you've done a really good job as an organization of kind of building work from the community level, but also from artists who are within your region. And I think that helps the work to feel authentic to place. Mm-hmm. It's not just like sort of plucking artists from elsewhere. I mean, I'm sure you bring artists from other places, but it's in a really sensitive way. And from the beginning, it seems like it was built based on donated works and working with artists within your region. So I think that really helps with that sensitivity point. But I also wanted to make mention, Kelly Gallagher mentioned in the chat about kind of functional assets, right? Like gates and some of those pieces. And I remember when we were on our planning call for this meeting, you mentioned that there were some opportunities you all have had where a gate was being installed or other pieces of infrastructure, and you were able to, I think, kind of pick off of that budget that was going to go to those things anyway. And instead of just hiring them out or buying something off the rack, you were able to kind of work with an artist and translate those infrastructure pieces into pieces of artwork. Am I remembering that correctly?
Sure. It was very early on in that moment, and the trail was butting up against the cemetery, which is, it's public-private land, a cemetery, right? It's owned by someone, but the public is always invited in, and there needed to be improvement of an old, crummy, gate, and instead of just hiring someone, we said, hey, we can find an artist to design something for this. So I think keeping your mind open to like those opportunities where something has to be done on a municipal or state, level. If the community and the Parks Department or whoever it is, if you can work with them and say, if we can meet the same budgetary needs or what limitations, do you mind if we look for an opportunity there? So like if an electrical lamp is going in or some kind of other thing is happening, we can kind of glom onto that and say, oh well, maybe there's a way we can hire an artist to kind of redesign this thing or create a painted surface on top of it to highlight it or make it look better than it was. The bridge that I showed you in the very beginning, that pedestrian bridge that's going over to Silk, that was city funding. They got a grant to improve trail systems, right? So it's altogether about $300,000 worth of work to get that piece purchased, delivered, and installed. And that all came through city and state funding. But we were able to work with the city to find the exact design that we wanted that we could use in the future as a backdrop or a scaffolding to put other artistic pieces on. So we really researched what's the capacity of that bridge and how can we add to that in a way that can enhance that bridge in the future. So those types of considerations, having your guys' group, as an active participant in those conversations with the local, local systems is really, really important. So, it's so great that Heinrich's on this call because he, obviously he's a really important link to that conversation. And it's important to have those throughout the state and the counties that are involved. You guys have a much more complex situation going through so many different locales, but still the opportunities are certainly there.
Thanks, Jim. I'd love to, so I think when I look at the way Pat and Maddie and Sophie and everyone who's working on this project, I see you guys talking and working on kind of development plans in specific areas. Arts and culture is one of them. You're looking at infrastructure and amenities, and you're looking at environmental stewardship, sustainability. And I mean, when we talk about arts and culture, we see it as potentially being used as a tool to help foster all of those areas, right? It could be used to inform and educate about maybe environmental sustainability. So I'm just, since we have Chris Klein here, who has obviously a finger on the pulse of environmental issues in the area, I'd love to kind of pivot the conversation to, and this kind of piggybacks on what Sophie was talking about. There's a balance that's needed. And I think from the community input, I think there's room for arts and culture, but there's also, there's this big piece of it's this corridor is, it's a prized possession of our community, and it's this beautiful open space. And how is that balanced, and what are the environmental issues, and how does that maybe integrate into this conversation? Chris, did anything stand out to you, or during this conversation or during Jim's presentation?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks. I think the cleanup and restoration of Silver Creek. So Silver Creek has a mining history. It has contamination that is really just kind of off the trail. That over the next couple of years, there's an effort by EPA and our office and many other stakeholders in the county and in the city to address that. And so I think that there's opportunities, and essentially it's stewardship, like what you said about environmental responsibility. So this is environmental stewardship to the creek. Essentially right now it's doing its best with two hands tied behind its back, basically. And so, I think there's opportunities. What I thought of is, there's opportunities to educate and engage people in that history and, in what's going on and what we're looking forward to as the restoration of the creek. And then I think as the, creek is being restored, there's, through Swanner Nature Preserve and others, there's, opportunities for the community to get involved in that restoration. And so from an arts perspective, what I thought is the more people know about that, I think that gives artists an opportunity to reflect on that, to reflect on the history, to, reflect on the challenges of this and, and then to, interpret that perception through art. And so I think that it could be argued by some that, what we're doing is not art, but, and it's like, well, in terms of restoration and the remediation, it's definitely an art from, from our end. But I think that, the opportunities for people to engage with it and respond to it through that, artistic medium, it just kind of opens up a new, interpretive path, I guess. I think, I'm not really an art person, so. But
Well, and I mean, in Jim's example, and I know it keeps coming up, but I think people are fascinated by this Love Bug Motel, where a biologist was working directly with an artist, and they're using the creative problem solving and the idea sharing and the crazy brain of an artist, let's say, with all of the information of a biologist, and to manifest that visually into something that's really impactful that the community can engage with. I thought that was a great example of kind of highlighting the importance of environment and specifically that ecosystem that exists there. So I'd be curious to see if there's ways to explore that here in Summit County, in areas that were appropriate to maybe highlight some of the treasures and that exist on the rail trail right now. Because I know even in a roundtable that Pat and Maddie hosted recently that I attended, it was, I think, isn't there like a bird sanctuary or a specific area on the trail where every spring there's a specific area that's of interest to, I think it's bird watchers. And there was a really interesting conversation that was led about how maybe arts and culture could play into information sharing about this area.
There isn't a specific location that I'm aware of, but if you're a birder in northern Utah, and I follow a couple sources, it's a heavily used area for birding during the migratory periods of the year. Yet just another perfect example of an amenity that is relatively passive, which is relatively low impact, that re-engages people's contact with that whole corridor.
Yeah.
East and west.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a project like the journaling stations is really interesting to me. And I know that was called out in the chat by a few people, but that's an integration of arts and culture, an integration of kind of critical thinking and mindfulness and exploration, connection to the landscape. And, those were designed in a very visually sensitive way. They're not kind of interfering with the environment, but rather they're providing you a space and an opportunity, or at least an awareness to stop and reflect. So I thought that was a really interesting project that I hadn't seen before, but that was a nice example, I think, in a lot of ways.
We work with biologists and ornithologists as well, and we'll do a day where we invite come out with a birder and during migration period and see add to your life list or whatever it happens to be. There are bald eagles nesting in this region, come and see them or whatever it happens to be. So that's always a great opportunity just to invite people out on the trail to see what's happening at that moment.
And I'd love to get Lynn involved in this conversation. Lynn, as a Colville resident, and knowing that specific area of the trail, what's resonating with you? What is getting you excited, or do you have concerns about some of these ideas that are flying around? I'd love to get your insights on this conversation, as and focused. I don't know. I mean, this trail runs through Wanship, it runs through Colville, goes all the way out to Echo, and I think obviously the treatment of maybe the corridor has to consider each community, right? Because each community has a specific identity. So I'm just curious of your thoughts.
Oh, right. Yeah. I've really felt such energy here with this group here today. And that energy, I think, can be so contagious. It can be. I think we have a little bit of work to do specifically in our section of the trail, our 3 miles that goes through Colville. I know Maddie came and did a presentation for our planning commission. It was a great presentation. And it was the very day that they were talking about a zone change along the rail trail there. And they just didn't quite catch the vision of what this could be. We ended up with a zone change to an industrial project, which I think is such a missed opportunity for Colville. And I feel like we have a little work to do as far as getting that vision out there of what this trail can really be and really getting that public engaged. And I'm hoping that some type of artistic endeavor will be part of the process early, not rather than later, because I think that can really turn people to focus wow, this could be something different than a place where concrete is dumped. I'm kind of excited about that car example. Maybe we'll figure out something to do with our concrete chunks until we get them cleaned up. But I feel that, you know, once this gets rolling, you know, the enthusiasm will pick up. But it seems to me that key to this success of this is getting public involvement, engagement, and making it specific to each community, but in a unified way. And I'm hoping that, you know, we're going to get some art along this trail sooner rather than later in this project.
Thanks, Lynn. And I know there's been some action in the chat. Thanks, Jim, for addressing some of those questions where there were some questions about what happened to the completed journals. And Jim mentioned that people do take the journals with them and they're encouraged to use them in different locations or again later at the same space. So that's really cool. So I know we're nearing 10:30, which is when we promised to wrap up with all of you and not take up any more of your morning. And so I wanted to open up the conversation to anyone who'd like to make any final comments, have final questions. If there's participants that would like to put some more questions in the chat, I would encourage you to do so now. You know, I think this is where normally when we host these in person, which I think we'll be able to get back there soon, the magic time for the, you know, for at least whenever we have these groups together and we do these events, the magic happens after when we're like, okay, the event's over. And then we usually have some people lingering and talking and sharing ideas. And, you know, you're left with some really inspired and energized people. I know we can't really emulate that in a virtual format, but Jake and I will stay on for a little bit. If anyone has any extra, you know, for a minute or two, if anyone has any extra comments or questions. But since it's a webinar, it's not as, you know, in person, casual. So I hope we can get back to in person soon. But just know that if you're feeling really inspired, if you have new ideas that are kind of sprouting from this conversation, please reach out to Jake or I. Jake, could you put our emails in the chat just so that people could email us if they have questions? I know Jim has shared his email. We're going to record this and put this on our website. We're going to send you all a follow-up survey. And then I think some of the slides were requested. So we'll do that so we can hopefully open up that avenue for continued conversation to maintain momentum on this idea and concept. So any final comments, questions? Pat and Maddie, are you feeling like you?
It looks like Jocelyn, it looks like Dick has his hand raised. Dick, do you want to jump in?
I would like to say thank you so much for this webinar. It's been very exciting. And we did obviously a lot of community outreach in 1990, 91 to the different communities. The big push from North Summit was the thought that Park City will get most of the attention, most of the monies, most of the maintenance, and North Summit would be sort of left out. And over the 30-year period, that has proved to be true. And I want to tag on Lynn's comment, which I thought were very insightful as far as concrete dumping, industrial field, the same thing through Wanship, where Blue Sky has sort of made a parking lot out of the rail trail. These are areas where artwork, you know, areas to sit down. Maybe there are small little kiosks with information about Chief Wanship and his impact on that community. That was a stagecoach community early on. Again, you have a lot of people in these areas, certainly some that maybe knew the history at one point in time, but it's a transient enough area that you have a lot of people that really don't know the story of their community. Wanship was a county seat. You know, it had probably 50, 60 homes there at one point in time before it became fields. I like Pat Putt's comment that we need to tell the story of who we are. And I think about Miles Rademan early on in Leadership Park City that says, if we don't tell our story, someone will make up stories for you. And I thought that was very, very insightful. But again, I've got a whole page of notes, tree planting along the rail trail, so it doesn't feel like everything is just out in the open, that it's more personal and more of a human scale. Union Pacific took out all the trees and shrubs because they were concerned on fires. Understandable. But now as it becomes this lineal 30-mile corridor, I think putting energy back into tree planting, shrub planting, different things that really create a calming, reflective feeling, especially when you have this riparian corridor. You've got the water. The water's there already. I think it would really lend itself to creating this more reflective situation. The other thing I'm going to, I've had this conversation with Pat Putt earlier, but I'm going to challenge each of the planners to get on a bicycle this summer at Bonanza Flats and ride to Echo. Each one of you, maybe it's just take a section each time, but to experience the trail in its full length. I think that is going to be worth the time and investment. But very exciting presentation. I would also encourage the pressuring the state legislature to start funding the Lee Ray Mcallister Trails Fund. Lee Ray Mcallister was incredibly important in creating energy for the rail trail, which the legislature did not want, the state did not want. It was really the community that wanted it, and the community got together and built it, finished it, and had a ribbon cutting ceremony for Jerry Miller, who was at that point head of state parks, and gave him a trail that was done. That's pretty much all I want to say. Very exciting. Thank you so much. Very well done.
Thanks so much, Jim. Oh, sorry, Dick, and Jim, and everyone. I know we are over time. Jake and I will stay on here for a minute if anyone would like to continue, but thank you all so much for joining. Thank you to our panelists for their time. And yeah, we'll send some follow-up information in hopes to keep this conversation going. So thanks all so much. And I hope you feel inspired on this Friday morning. So have a great day.